Joining us from Los Angeles is Gabrielle Bullock, Principal and Director of Global Diversity for the design practice Perkins and Will. Welcome, Gabrielle.
Hi, John. Thank you.
Yeah. You've been with Perkins and Will for 32 years and in your current position for 7. Can you remember a time in the past when the calls for workplace and social equality and diversity have been as emphatic as they are today?
Absolutely not. I think the closest we've come is the call to action around Me Too and the gender equity movement a couple of years ago. But, you know, we haven't done much since Whitney Young Jr.'s speech and call to action to the AIA back in 1968. So I think now is the time, right? If not now, when? And I think what's really sparked the interest now is not only COVID and the pandemic and what's that done to the world and our communities, but also, you know, the murder of George Floyd and all of the conversation around race and justice has really hit home for everybody in every aspect of society, not the least of which is the building design and construction.
Mm-hmm. What is your definition of diversity and equality, and how close is the industry and your company to meeting those aspirations?
Right. Well, allow me a whimsical analogy.
Okay.
So diversity, if you can imagine, is inviting somebody to the party. Inclusion is asking them to dance once they're at the party. Equity is asking them to share their playlist at the party. And so I think the AEC industry has gone some distance regarding diversity and inclusion, but I don't think that we've really tackled the equity part, the really valuing, engaging, and working toward a more equitable profession. I think that even Perkins and Will, who's been really focused on this and has led the charge for the last 7 years at least, that we still have a ways to go on racial equity and racial diversity and how it impacts our work. I would say that we have achieved a 50-50 gender. We have achieved a culture of diversity, inclusion, and engagement and equity, but we have a lot of work to do, as does most of the industry. Hope I answered that question.
You do. If you care to elaborate, how do you get beyond just being a numbers game though?
So it's definitely not a numbers game because, you know, diversity, if you just look at diversity, then that's a numbers game. You're checking a box, right? So if we really want to impact the culture of the organization, the advancement of the profession and building the pipeline, it's got to be more than the numbers. So for instance, we develop a strategic action plan around diversity on an annual basis. And it's both qualitative and quantitative. And I'll give you an example about how we're focusing on now, most recently, is how do we address the racial inequity and the justice and impact of justice and social and racial equity on our work. So we're doing a deep dive into our design processes, right? Whereas several years ago when I started this, we had to look at the numbers. Where are we demographically? Where are the gaps? So that's the number side. But now you have to look at the gaps in your culture. What's your demographic? Do you mirror the clients and communities you serve? Are your design processes equitable, right? Do people in your organization feel comfortable bringing their whole self to work? And so that's the hardest part. And that's where you have the most meaningful outcome is when you look at your culture and not just the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Companies right now are tripping over themselves, claiming their commitment to a diverse and equitable work and life environment. But you know, I've heard this before. I mean, I'm 66 years old, and you know, you know, what's different now? What are the roadblocks that need to be navigated, and how should all this change be measured?
Yep. So the difficult conversations have to happen, right? And as far as following through on action, I think those organizations who have made public commitments, statements, if they're not followed up by actions, then it's going to be visible for everybody to see. And I don't think that anybody, not even us in the AEC, will get away with not addressing what's been revealed, blatant disparities, inequities, and lack of diversity in our profession. So I think it's a call to action that everybody needs to address. I think some of the roadblocks are actually having those difficult conversations within your organization and with your teams, you know, talking about white supremacy, talking about white privilege. What do you do with power? How do you make room at the table, right? For more diverse perspectives and people. So I think that's number one. And it's difficult and it's going to take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. So that's number one. I think those that are in power to make change should do it, right? If you're in a position, a leadership position, to help make change toward a more equitable and diverse environment and profession, then do it. People will follow. I think, and all of this has to be done with rigor, right? So we've outlined, you know, we've had this program for a long time, but we've recently outlined, we're going to double down on 7 things that we were doing, but we're going to double down on it. And it goes everything from mentoring and partnering with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, scholarships for underrepresented and Black students. What else? Promotions, looking at our promotions of Black staff. Are they in leadership? How do we more equitably evaluate? So those are just some of the things that we've made a commitment both externally and internally to double down on. So I think organizations, one, need to be intentional, deliberate, transparent, and focused, and hold each other accountable. And I honestly believe, and if you want to compare it to the industry's call to action around sustainability and resiliency, this ought to be at that same value level. This is urgent. I think I consider these last 5 months a cosmic reset, and that it's our last chance to do better.
My last question is, do you have any initiatives that are moving forward at your company that align themselves with the current social and political climate?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I'll further elaborate. You know, last year when we were looking at our strategic plan around diversity and inclusion for 2020, we as the Design Council said, you know what, we really need to look at how we're doing our work. Are we culturally competent? Are we representing the communities that we're serving, for instance, in Black and Brown communities? Is our work being authentic and done in a just and equitable way? And so I think it was fortuitous that here we are, and that is the one thing that we're spending quite a lot of time on, is educating all of our staff on the impact of a design process that is Eurocentric or Western based from one perspective is not the way to go. So we're exploring our design processes. We're doubling down, as I said, on partnering and building the pipeline. You know, that will have the greatest impact long term, is building that pipeline. So those are 2 of the ones that we are knee deep in right now. Long term, we'll develop more scholarships and focus on the retention and promotion and recruitment of more diverse staff.
How much of what you're doing involves the rethinking of the projects that you get involved with? One of the projects that you brought to my attention was Destination Crenshaw. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what this broke ground in February. Talk a little bit about what that is and how it intersects with what we've been talking about.
Right. And it's actually the epitome, the perfect example of what we're trying to convey to our teams and our firm, is that this project in South Los Angeles, our outdoor cultural and art experience for the Black community, engage the Black community, the community as a design partner. We didn't tell them what they needed. We listened. we could represent them. There's 5 or 6 Black architects on the project that the client could connect with. And that was very important to this particular client. They wanted a shorthand cultural connection with their team. They wanted to be able to handpick their team. And I think more and more of these projects, the clients in the community want to know that their voices will be heard, that they will not be force-fed a design solution that is based on just expertise. And that's where I think the real shift is. It's not just expertise that makes good design. What really makes good design is being authentic and engaging the community in the resultant design and the process. So more and more of our clients are asking for a diverse and inclusive team and approach. And frankly, there's not enough of us to go around. And so short of being able to represent racially, we must become culturally competent in our design thinking. By research, by engaging, by partnering with minority firms if you have to. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually, you know, one of the best ways to both build up and engage other professionals, but also to do what you can to do the right thing for the communities that we're working in.
Gabrielle, thank you very much for talking to me
Thank
about
you.
this. I hope that a lot of more people are listening and that realize that we're at a precipice and take an opportunity when it's made available to them.
Yep. Can I make one closing statement?
Sure.
In the words of John Lewis, find a way to get in the way. Thank you.